Hey, friends, welcome back to Becoming Unbound, the podcast where we break free from the boxes society puts us in, the expectations we've been handed, and the old stories we're so done living by. This is the space where we explore what it really means to be free, whether it's in our careers, relationships, money, or mindsets, and hear from people who are doing just that. So today I'm super excited. Our guest today is Kyle Miller, a life coach and the founder of Kyle Miller Coaching. So he helps people heal from narcissistic abuse and rebuild their lives with confidence and clarity. He brings his own lived experience into his work, supporting clients in reclaiming their identity and stepping into real purpose-driven success. His mission? To help survivors not just heal, but to thrive. Friends, I am so excited for you to hear this conversation. Let's dive in. All right, Kyle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this.
Amazing. Yeah. So I wanted to start, Kyle. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, the work that you do, maybe a little bit of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, kind of starting from the beginning, it's in September, it will have been 20 years that I've been studying personal development. And it's been an incredible journey, and really gave up music for a long time just to listen to audiobooks and podcasts and everything. Drove truck for 16 plus years, so it gave me a lot of time to be able to listen and learn and all of that. And then was in an abusive relationship for 14 years, and got out of that, and really just went back to what I already knew. I'd been studying personal development for a long time then, and so I didn't really know what was going on in this relationship, but I knew what to do. And so I went back to work and went and researched and learned and reached out for support, and that really is kind of a lot of the culmination to what brings me to doing this work now. Is it just was a miserable, hard experience for me to not just get out of the relationship and figure out what was going on, but also to actually get help, even from the people that were there to help. And so it took a lot of work on my part to be able to. A lot of what I did was I had to work through the things in my mind so that I could present them to the coaches, to the therapists, to all of those people that were there to support me. But I had to present it in a way that made sense to them so that they could help me work through it. So there was a lot of work on my part, which is what I hopefully now don't have to have my clients do. It's a very, they get to show up and just let it all out, and I'll sift through it and we'll work through it. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible story. And I loved what you said about if there's so much work for you to do. And I think that is, I mean, goes without saying that like healing involves a lot of your own personal work. And I think it gets really confusing. I think when they say like, you have to do the work, you have to do the work. And sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, where do I start to do this supposed work to unbind myself from a situation, to get out of my own way? Like, can you describe to us, what does it mean to do that work that you obviously had a lot of experience in understanding? How did that look for you?
I think, and it's funny because that's one of the hardest things with most of the personal development work is there's this continuous reminding us that we need to do the work. And I think there's very little of the actual how to in a lot of the books and audio and everything else. It's like, okay, do the work, but what is that? And and I think for me, the biggest thing that I focus on with myself and with my clients is the awareness, because without the awareness, we can't change anything. And so that really is the key to everything in our lives. So once we're aware of, okay, this is why I do the unhealthy behaviors. This is why I'm not doing the things that I want to do. And it's always it's an evolving, process of bringing more awareness into your life. And that's, I think, the basis for doing the work is the awareness of why it is that we do what we do or we don't.
Hey friends, quick little interruption. You have something to say, something real, something that could change lives, but instead you're stuck Googling how to edit, how to post, and how to make your podcast actually go somewhere. You're overwhelmed, second guessing every step, and wondering if it's even worth it. That's where I come in. I help entrepreneurs and creatives launch and manage powerful podcasts that actually grow their audience and build their business. No more guessing, no more burnout. Just you showing up to speak while I handle the rest. I manage top ranked shows around the world. Editing done, strategy covered, social content handled. You record the magic and I take it from there. So if you're ready to finally make your podcast work for you and share your story with the people who need it most, go to carlybutlermedia.com and book a call. You don't have to figure this out alone. Now back to the episode. Yeah. Yeah, I think those patterns, the awareness, and what I resonate so much with is the fact that when we start to do this work and we start to look inwards, it's fine to have this awareness like, okay, I'm stuck, or, oh, I have this pattern, or, oh, I have this behavior that isn't serving me. And to then have that awareness, but then to remember it, like literally just to remember it in our everyday, like, okay, so I have this awareness. I wrote it in my journal 2 months ago. And then 2 months from that point, I'm going about my daily life being like, reimagining myself in that pattern, or that pattern is re-emerging. And then it's like, okay, stop. Why is this pattern reemerging? We already figured out that it exists, but it's hard, it's literally hard to remember in that day-to-day stuff to like remind myself like, okay, I have a people pleasing habit or behavior that, I know the whys behind it. I know probably where I got it from. And yet to remember it every single day in interactions with other human beings, with placing people's needs above my own, like it is hard. How do you help your clients to remember that kind of conscious awareness in every moment?
I think one of the things that complicates this a lot is that we think that from where we became aware of it and where we figured it out, that we're the same from that point, and then moving forward, we have that awareness. So we can obviously just move through it because we know how we handled it. And I think that the more our awareness increases, it's hard because we are becoming someone new or becoming more of ourselves. And so I think that is probably one of the most difficult things with it because it seems like we're regressing, but we're gaining more awareness. And when you gain more awareness, you don't gain it on all the good things. You gain it on everything. And so then all of the things that didn't used to bother us, because they were, in a lot of ways, it's because we have so much noise in our minds. And so as we quiet the noise, we become aware, we work through the things, it quiets the noise in our mind, and then we hear all of these other things that we didn't hear before. And so now we have another thing that we have to work through. Even if what worked before really worked well, it doesn't necessarily work again now because we have literally, in a lot of ways, become a totally new person with all of that new awareness. So I
Yeah,
think
it's
that's the struggle behind that.
rapid shifting as soon as you find that awareness. Yeah, like your whole energy field, like once you bring a behavior pattern into your field of awareness, then all of a sudden, like your field, your energetic field changes, right? And I think that's important to realize is that, like, you aren't the same person that you were 6 months ago, the way you deal with things. And yeah, that's important to like kind of give yourself grace when you're dealing with stuff because you are becoming different. So, Kyle, I'm really curious. Was there a moment in time when I know you said you had been doing personal development and that kind of work for about 20 years? You had a job as a truck driver, which is the ultimate for binging podcasts and audiobooks. I feel like that's beyond the most perfect commute that you could ever ask for, because I feel like even now I work from home and I miss that. I miss being able to listen to the audiobooks and the podcasts. And but I digress from that. But was there a moment for you that all of a sudden kind of was like this light bulb to be like, oh, there's a whole other realm that I could be looking in, or maybe it was a rock bottom that you hit? Like what, maybe you can talk about one or two of those moments. I know there's many usually, but what was that moment and what sort of sparked that awakening for you?
The biggest thing that happened, and this was when I was married, and for years, literally, I believed that I didn't have any empathy or compassion for anyone else. And this was, I mean, this was an ingrained and trained and programmed belief. And I said something to that effect to one of my best friends, who I've known, I don't know, coming up on 30 years probably. And and I said, you know, I feel like I'm just ruining my family's life. And and it's because I don't have any empathy or compassion. And he said, well, I call F and BS on that. And was just, that hit me like a ton of bricks. It just shattered the illusion that I had been living in. And so that was one of the major turning points where I looked around and I went, okay, maybe I'm not the only problem in this situation, because that was literally what I thought for years of my life. And so then I started diving into, okay, what's actually going on? You know, that was the point where, okay, I have all this background in personal development. I really understand a lot of the psychology and a lot of the different things, but I had no clue about toxic relationships, about narcissists, about, you know, any of the emotionally abusive things, and the manipulation, and I mean just the whole gamut. So I that was the point when I dove back in and started researching to figure out what was actually going on. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm innocent or was innocent in that relationship, because I wasn't. I had a lot of toxic patterns myself, but it allowed me to realize that, okay, I'm not the only problem here. And that was a huge awakening for me.
That's huge that you were able to. I mean, that's a wild belief to hold for so long in your life. And good on your best friend for actually being able to, say that hard thing to be like, "Whoa, dude, that's absolutely not a true statement." And it was I'm glad that you took that to heart, because that can living with that kind of a limiting belief for yourself is intense. And I can see why that would keep you very stuck in relationships, or like if blame was being placed even in a job, like all sorts of stuff that can kind of implicate itself into. So wow, that must have been kind of a revolutionary experience when you realize that, like, of course, there's another person involved, and it always takes two to tango. And whether that's a relationship in your family, like how you and your family show up, how you and a partner show up, how you and your employer show up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's easy to point the finger, but it's also even more difficult to like be like, oh, I had a part in this, in continuing on with toxic patterns or behaviors and stuff like that. So what was sort of the initial, like, next step that you took to start to realize where this relationship was going and how it was affecting you?
I just dove into the research, really.
Okay.
I wanted to learn about, and I don't think I dove directly into narcissists or any of that, because I was still trying to figure out what was actually happening. And so that led me to finding out about narcissism and all of those things. And then I started to, I mean, because I had already shut down in the relationship, I was at a
Mm,
point where where I was just completely shut down for the most part. And and what I think was the next breaking point was when I realized at a certain point that she didn't want to actually make any changes or to make anything better. She wanted me to be a good little husband and shut up and go to work and do what I'm told. And that was when I really realized that, okay, this is not something that I can continue forward with.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty wild. And the fact that you had no idea that that even existed made you the perfect victim of that, because a lot of times when we go about our world and we have these beautiful big open hearts and we see the best in people and we understand that, you know, everything is, right and happy, and we kind of walk around with these blinders on that, nothing could go wrong, and it's a beautiful place to be. And if there's a lack of awareness of understanding like human psychology and understanding why people end up in these narcissistic tendencies and how they got to have those behaviors. So I'm going to push back a little bit right here because, and I don't want to invalidate your experience. And I know the word narcissism is thrown
Yeah.
around like it's a hot potato these days. Everyone's got a narcissist in their life. Everyone knows a narcissist. And it's so easy just to like slap that label on someone and be like, nope, you're a narcissist. There you go. I'm going to put you in this little box. And then there's like, you just, that person can go live in that box and they don't have to, take accountability or look into like why that person is the way they are. So what would you say to that, to someone who maybe a client comes to you and you can maybe see that there's not so much true narcissism, because I know that is like a diagnosed thing and there's probably a spectrum. How do you deal with stuff like that, like the label of narcissism in today's age? What does that look like, feel like for you?
First of all, I love that you push back on that, and we definitely need more of that. I talk about it a lot on on all the different platforms I'm on, but the reality is that not everyone is a narcissist, and and I hear people say as well, we all have those tendencies, and that I also push back against and disagree with pretty strongly, because a lot of, and this, it goes to so many different patterns, if we want to call diagnosis of all of the different things, so whether ADHD or codependency, CPTSD, insecure attachment, there's a whole spectrum of different things that from the outside those behaviors look like narcissism, and
Mm.
they're not. They come from a very different place. And so there's a lot of people, and I have a lot of clients that come to me that think I'm a narcissist, or I'm unsure if I'm a narcissist or not. And and I mean, really, first of all, the fact that you're wondering if you are probably in the first place means that you're probably not. But the way that I really kind of draw the line, and with all of that being said as well, I have suspicion about people in my life that I think are potentially narcissists, but I still don't even throw the label at them, because I don't know, and they're not diagnosed, and I can't diagnose, and I mean, on and on. So there's lots of pieces. They're not healthy people, and I don't want those people in my life, which is good enough. And I think that getting to good enough is a very important thing. And I think the line for me is, do they have accountability? Do they have empathy and compassion for other people? Real, actual, genuine, accountability, empathy, and compassion. And if they don't have those, then I'm leaning towards maybe they're a narcissist, but it's still not, I don't diagnose, and it doesn't matter. That's the hard part to get to, because, oh, if I had this label that I could give them, then I would know what to do. And it's never that simple in any relationships, in any situation. And I look at it as, okay, is it healthy or is it not healthy?
Mm.
If it's not healthy, even if they're, whether or not they're toxic or not, they may be toxic in the relationship with you. And it may also, and I hate to say trigger or whatever, not to, because we all need to own our own stuff. So if it's causing things in relationships where you are then also toxic as well, then this is not a healthy relationship. Narcissist or not, or any other, diagnosis or anything else. It really doesn't matter. And that's really what I look at. And I think that most people that are throwing the finger around at everyone being a narcissist, I I hate to say that I kind of lean more towards they may have some narcissistic tendencies. Either way, they're definitely not secure. They're not
Mm.
healthy. And it's not to throw shame on anybody, but it's a thing for all of us to look at within ourselves.
Yeah, I love that reframe of like understanding that you can throw that label out and it's a huge spectrum. I love that you have like a sort of some qualifiers there, and for our listeners, I think that's a really great sort of thing to like think about, whether there is accountability, whether there's empathy, compassion, like those things are sort of experiential, evidence-based things. Like you can see if someone goes out to, you're having a walk in a park and run into other human beings, and do they have compassion and empathy for like the general public, for your family? Are they accountable to what they say? Like those are really great things, because God, I just think it's so easy for us to completely stay stuck in our own mess by just saying, well, they're a narcissist, they're a problem. And this can apply to every situation, right? Like family members, your boss, you might just be like, well, my boss is horrible. They're a narcissist. I'm in this job for X, Y, and Z reasons. And I'm going to just like, it's horrible because of them versus it's horrible because maybe it's not in alignment. Maybe you need to make a huge shift. Maybe you need to start speaking your mind, or you're sticking yourself into this little box and just being like, okay, everything else is the problem and I'm just going to stay stuck. Like it's so easy to do that, to just place blame. And I myself have like, I know that I've done this before, until I was like, okay, enough blaming other people and what they are doing, quote unquote, wrong, to then be like, okay, I have to make these moves for myself, rather than just pouring out all this attention and to be like, you're a narcissist, you're a narcissist, you're a narcissist. Like, and that's not even, like you said, I love that you even compared it to like ADHD, PTS, what was it?
CPTSD. Yeah,
CPT.
complex. Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many things that
There's
could make humans a little more self-centered, a little more like just what's even the word, like not accountable to their actions because they're forgetful and they've got a million things happening in their busy ADHD brain, which again, I have some pushback on to like what that even is. Um
yeah.
and I think it's important that like instead of just pointing all the fingers, I think it's great to have that awareness, look inside. It might surprise you. You might have some tendencies that if you listed out narcissistic tendencies,
Mhm.
could turn out you check a couple boxes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not wrong or right, or right or wrong. Like it's just
Yeah,
kind of
and
just is.
I think that most of us that have not really become secure in ourselves, we tick off however many of those boxes. But it's when I look at it, it comes from a different place than it does with the narcissist, which is why I caveat with the empathy, compassion, and accountability. And I think that one of the other things is the less healthy we are, the more that we view people, if we don't have good boundaries, if we have terrible, unhealthy boundaries, a lot of times when we look at people with healthy boundaries, they seem like they're toxic or brash or, just it's like, why do they have to be that way? And, and I think it's a learning experience for us to go, oh, maybe they just have good, healthy boundaries and they're not letting any garbage in. And we have not so good boundaries. And that's why we're so angry, upset about the way that they handle their boundaries. It's a reflection back to us. Okay, maybe I should work on my boundaries a little bit.
Definitely. And it's so easy for people to just trample all over those little lines in the sand that you create for yourself. And and I think it's an important distinction between I heard once that boundaries have nothing to do with other people. They have everything to do with who you are and what you hold. So if the whole point of a boundary is that if someone crosses that, well, they crossed it. Like it's a done deal. You had a boundary, they crossed it for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't have a regard for your boundary, they didn't know, they don't care. But then it's your choice, your decision as to what to do next. Do you continue pouring your energy into a relationship where that person is so flagrantly just crossing your boundaries all day long? Like it's not about telling them like, hey, you crossed a boundary here, like do something about it. It's like it's time for me to pull back and bring that energy back into myself or whatever it is. And then yeah, you look around at people who have strong boundaries and they walk away when something happens and you're like, whoa, how did you just do that? It's like magic.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and that's the boundary thing is a big deal, and that's it's something that we continually, I think, for most of us, will work on for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think boundaries and this whole healing world is like once you reach level 10, it unlocks the door immediately for the next level. So there's never an end. I love sort of unpacking the idea that there's this kind of like this spiral staircase that like you go up and you go back down and then you go up again, but each time you go up and down you're still going up higher and higher and figuring out more about who you are, how you show up in these relationships, what, either healthy or toxic behavior patterns you bring to certain relationships. And that kind of brings me to my next question is that if someone is feeling like they've brought a little bit of awareness into their world, they're starting to sort of feel like, okay, well, I feel really stuck in this relationship. Um, where would you suggest that even start? Like they have this awareness, they maybe don't even know where to go, what to do, what to read. What would they do in that situation?
I think one of the most helpful things, especially in the beginning of that awareness, is and I don't recommend this as a substitute for therapy, for coaching, for any other support. But I think you can take the conversations that you have and you can punch them into ChatGPT or any of the other AI. The full conversation, not edited conversation here, the full conversation, and it will describe to you what is happening in these conversations. And I think
Mm,
that's it's a very helpful thing, because often, I mean, I called the crisis hotline because I was tired of feeling like I was crazy, and I wasn't sure who to turn to. And so that was my process. And they said, oh yeah, actually that is abuse. Now, whether or not that was a necessarily an accurate assessment of the short conversation that I had with them or not. But support is the next biggest thing to get. And in whatever way you can get that support. And, and I think we want to, because with a lot of coaches, therapists, lots of everyone, we want to look at, okay, what was your part in this? And especially with the abuse, it is so important for us to acknowledge and to be acknowledged for what we went through. And that is, I think it is a huge missing step, and it's a misstep for most people that are trying to help people move through these relationships. And so we can get to, okay, we can get to all the things that I did or I didn't do, or the way I was showing up, all of that. But first it must be acknowledged what we actually went through, and having the space to be able to do that, because it is very hard to move forward from all of the abuse and everything that we go through without being seen for who we are and what we went through.
Yeah, that empathetic witness is the term that comes to mind. And I know that they use that in somatic therapy. And I think a lot of healing, like, unless you have an empathetic witness to your situation to validate those feelings in your body, those sensations, those conversations that happen, like, I don't know, you can talk to yourself, you can talk to AI, but until you have a person who can actually tell you, like, "Hey, I hear you. I see what you went through, and my goodness, that must have been a lot." Kind of thing. So I love that you brought that up, because support and really figuring out, like, yeah, you can talk to anything you want, but until you find someone who can actually understand and just hear you, like, sometimes that's all it takes, is just
Yeah.
someone to hear you finally. So I ask everyone on this podcast how they define freedom. And I say this to you now because if someone is listening here and they are afraid, which is a fear of leaving a relationship in, and we can even maybe talk about this after, but there, I can see why there'd be a lot of fears around leaving an abusive or narcissistic relationship. And I can only imagine what that sort of first step, even inching towards leaving that toxic environment. So if someone's listening to this podcast, they're feeling scared, but they have this awareness, but they want to know, like, how is this going to benefit me in the end? Well, my understanding is leaving that relationship, whether it's 6 months, whether it's, after a year of healing and really doing the work and understanding everything, what is the freedom going to feel like on the other side of that? Like, what are we working towards? So for you, like, freedom from that relationship, maybe, like, let's paint the sort of light at the end of the tunnel right now. What does freedom feel like?
It feels different now for me than when I first got out. When I first got out of the relationship, I felt literally like I had dodged a bullet, like I cheated death. And I I was I was kind of hysterical in a lot of ways, because I felt like I had gotten out of something that I didn't know whether or not for a long time I would live through. And so that I can't even express what that actually feels like, because it was so far beyond. Now there was a lot of mess and healing and all kinds of things in between, but it was like, okay, I can finally I can finally start to learn how to be me.
Mm.
And I think, through time, I realized more and more different little things, things in my house that, oh, I can actually change this. I can actually, but it took months, years for me to get to the point where I can have whatever I want. If I want to spend money on this thing, if I want to do this thing, if I want to change this, I can just decide and do those things. And I think so much of the little small daily things that we deal with being controlled in so many ways, those are some of the biggest things and also some of the hardest things for us to work through and embrace and be able to choose. Oh, I can just do this now. I can just decide and just go do this or buy this or whatever it is that I want to do in my life now. And that's it's it's one of those big things, which seems like a little thing, but it's a huge thing. I mean, and of course, removing the abuse and all of that. Um, One of the big things that you also gain is you gain and I just heard someone talk about this, and it was wonderful because they talked about the felt safety. And so there's a physical safety, and then there is a felt safety. And in these relationships, we never have felt safety. Even if we're not physically in danger, there is never felt safety. And that is it is just an unbelievable thing to have when you can just feel safe in yourself. And I think that's probably another big piece of it as well.
Yeah, and I think you're so right with the idea that like your brain can't tell the difference between physical safety and that felt emotional mental safety. It's the same thing up here. Like we're super evolved, but like whether it's a actual tiger or in front of you or whether it is a just I don't know, so like a car accident that you're looking at, or, now maybe you're registering that all of a sudden you're understanding the abuse that's happening, the control that's being placed on you. Like your brain is still going to put out that same like flight, fight response that like to live in that state, to live like there's a tiger in the next room from you all the time. Oh, that's unimaginable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if someone is feeling like they are stuck in this relationship. They know that okay, so they've decided that they want to get support. They maybe have talked to a friend. What I wanted to touch on is that from what I've researched around narcissistic abuse, relationships, it does appear that there needs to be a very strategic exit plan in that you remain in a safe, both physically and mental space. So can you touch on that a little bit? I'm super curious. I know you see things on Instagram and stuff like that, but when it is, that bad and you believe that there's like, you need to get out or you might not make it out due to mental health issues, physical health issues. What does that look like? What's that exit plan?
The first piece of this, which is probably the most important part, is that you're going to feel probably with every fiber of your being that you're betraying the person that you love. Because no matter what happened in the relationship, the emotions that you had for that person were real. They are real. And so what we immediately feel is that anything that we do at all in planning or doing anything to get out of that relationship, it's going to feel like betrayal. And that's normal. And it doesn't mean that we should stay. It doesn't mean that we need to continue with it, but that's going to be the immediate feeling that we have. And then because from that understanding, okay, this is going to feel awful. It's going to feel like betrayal. And then we can start with the planning. And
Mm.
and I think, setting up whatever support you have. And if you're having trouble with finding support, maybe you have to find it online. I think documenting every single thing. I mean, it's not fun. This is a whole nother job that you have now. But you need to document every single conversation, everything that happens. And if you have someone in your life that's safe, then I suggest setting up like a Google Doc or something like that where you can share that to them also, so they have access, you have access, and then starting to make the plan, set aside money, a safe place to leave, finding more support. There are people out there. I know it seems like there's no one out there that wants to help, but there definitely are people. I meet them every single day, online and otherwise. And it's hard. I think the other part of this is the trust. And so because we've gone through this, we don't want to trust anyone, and we don't trust anyone. And that's reasonable, and it's not wrong, and it's probably the way that we should be. And the good people will not care. They won't care if you don't trust them or if you only trust them a little bit. And they have no issues at all whatsoever with earning that trust. It's a conversation I have with every single one of my clients, that they absolutely probably should not trust me for sure until I have earned that trust. And that's the normal way of building relationships. And good people don't care. They will show up, they will help you anyway, and they will earn that trust. And so, just I think all of those things together, and then helping, perhaps using AI as well. You can punch in, I know this is, I hate to rely heavily on that, but sometimes most of the time, probably. We are not in a space where we can really think clearly, and it makes everything so much more difficult. And so figuring out how can I actually get out of here? Sometimes we need a little extra help. And if that's the help we can get, then that's way better than nothing.
Yeah, I think that's really it's valuable. Like honestly, it takes all of the I mean, like specifically talking about ChatGPT or AI or whatever it is that
Mhm.
you use, like it is literally taking all of the research, all of the podcast transcripts, everything in a collective like space to give you that information. I'm always careful. Sometimes it does get into these like very, it validates and validates because it does not want you to leave that space and you want it to keep using that thing. So it validates your experience. But I think that's exactly what you need in that moment, right? Like I need to feel like what I'm going through is valid because if you have been gaslit for the umpteenth time and you are truly questioning your entire reality that you are crazy, you are too sensitive, you are over dramatic, you are all of those things that that person says, right? So that idea of validation is so important, and whether you get that from someone else or from AI, like that is an important part because oh my god, that gaslight loop of just going down and farther and farther and farther and farther until you have absolutely no sense of self and you don't know left from right.
You need to be able to think clearly, and it's very hard, if not impossible, in those situations.
Yeah. So if someone they're going through the steps, I'd love to hear like what's your process like, Kyle? Like what do you sort of like to do with your clients? What can they get as far as value from you? Like how do you walk them through this process?
So a lot of the way that I coach is really a very intuitive process, which makes it very hard to describe, I guess. It's very tailored to each individual, as it should be.
Yeah.
And a lot of what the beginning part is getting acknowledgement. You know, they need the acknowledgement for, okay, this was abuse, this was manipulation, this was understanding about a lot of what happened in their lives. And so that's a lot of the beginning of the coaching for me is, and it's incredibly helpful to know about narcissism and all of the abuse and the tactics and everything else until it's not. And so we go through that and kind of get through that part, and then we come back to, okay, so now what are the things in you to work on? Because the biggest thing I think for everyone that goes through these relationships is their entire focus is on everything outside of themselves. And so they're reacting to everything else that's going on. And what we have to do is bring ourselves back into ourselves so that we actually know how we feel and what we want and what we've done or what we don't want to do or all of that, but really bringing ourselves back inside ourselves and focusing on our lives, our thoughts, our emotions. And that's really, you know, I feel like the whole narcissist thing for most people, it is the surface level result of so many other things that have happened in our lives. And it's not to diminish any of the abuse or anything else, but there's a reason that we got into these relationships and then we stayed in them. And it's not for shame or judgment or anything else, but once we've worked through, okay, that whole thing with the narcissist, and it doesn't mean it won't come up, another 150 times, because it probably will. But bringing ourselves back into, okay, so what about me, and what do I want, and what do I need to work through, and how can I begin to focus on me and building a life that I want, rather than continually dumping all that energy into, they did this and they did that and I went through this, and all of the things which are helpful in the beginning, but they're only helpful until they're not.
Yeah, that's a brilliant thing. And I think the people, the systems, the anything that we find ourselves stuck in, those things, the external things, benefit from us not paying attention to our own needs. Like the more you can just sacrifice your own needs in a corporate job, the better that corporation is going to do because you are pouring all of your hard work into them and their vision and the bottom line of that company. Same goes for a relationship. That person benefits from you having all of your senses focused on everything else going on around the world and them versus paying attention to your needs. It applies to so many different things that all of these systems that keep us that keep us bound, that keep us stuck, rely on us not having any awareness of our body, our needs, our values, our wants, our desires, like all of those things. If you have no idea what you want or what you're sensitive to, like I'll give an example. I am so highly sensitive to sound now. I was a classroom teacher.
Mm.
Like that to me is wild that for 10 years I was just living in this complete abyss of like not knowing that I was incredibly sensitive to like sounds and things around me. And yet I was in a classroom, which is, if you ask me, one of the noisiest, most overstimulating places, but my needs weren't on the forefront ever. And now, as it turns out, I'm just aware of sounds and things like that. Like I live in Toronto and like the construction around me is like I'm this close to just bailing and moving to the country. But I had no idea that these were things that like got my nervous system up in arms because I just had completely let go of all my needs, all my wants, all my desires, all my sensitivities. I had no idea who I was and what I was doing in a classroom that was the most overstimulated place. But all the places that I worked at loved that I had no needs and no desires because they would just put me in whatever classroom in the loudest, noisiest environments ever that had decibel volumes through the roof, and I would have no idea. So I love that you're bringing that back to the person, their needs, their wants, what is going on for you, and not so much energy on them, that situation, that abuse. Like once you work through that, you get the validation. Bringing all that energy back to you is a beautiful experience.
Yeah, and I think, about what you were talking about with the classroom and the noise and all of that. It makes me wonder, because I see a lot of people that the more work that they've done, the more that they see that other things bother them. And that's, I have some clients that are have worked in very chaotic environments, and that's normal, and they thrived in those environments. And the more work they've done on healing themselves, the more they are going, I don't like this anymore. The TV shows, the communication with friends or family. I mean, it literally affects everything in our lives. And it's wild to see how much more sensitive, which I think is the normal way that we would
Yeah.
be. Oh, I don't, these movies that, are just drama, chaos, and all of that. I don't like those.
Yeah, I
And
don't know if anyone should like them. It's a
yeah,
question to ask, right? Like I don't
yeah,
maybe that is, but like are our nervous systems from a baseline perspective,
mhm,
are we meant to thrive in that much chaos in big cities and
yep,
overstimulating environments in loud spaces and construction filled cities? Like is that normal? Like maybe I'm saying I'm sensitive to it, but maybe I'm not. Maybe that's just my baseline is like a normal human baseline, but I've just been so out of touch with that chaos is where I thought I did well.
yeah. Well, and I think that goes with the increasing awareness.
Hmm.
Because the more work we do, then the more aware we are of all of those things. So the things that never used to bother us, that we didn't think about at all, and then all of a sudden it's like, why is this a big deal? This is dumb. I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be, messed up and upset, and I shouldn't have all these thoughts about this thing. It's another way that we pick up the stick and beat on ourselves. Is this shouldn't it this has never bothered me before. Why does this bother me now? And it's deepening, how our own health and our awareness. And oh, okay, I don't actually like that.
Yeah,
which is,
surprising what you don't like when you finally start to listen to yourself.
yes.
So, Kyle, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. This has been amazing. I feel like our listeners are walking away with exactly what they need, the validation that what they're going through is real and the steps to take to what to do next, right? So if someone wanted to find you, they want to get into contact with you, how can they do that, Kyle?
Kyle Miller Coaching is my website, kylemillercoaching.com, and you can schedule a call through there. You can get on my email list if you want. The first consultation is free, and so I'm happy to talk to anyone. But that's the place to go. I'm Kyle Miller Coaching across all the social media everywhere, and happy to connect with anyone anywhere.
Amazing. Any last words before we sign off for today?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is being kind to yourself in this whole process, no matter what happens. And when inevitably you're not kind to yourself, then being kind to yourself anyway, because we're going to notice that we weren't being kind, we were being mean and abusive to ourselves, and then we beat ourselves up for it. And I think that's one of the biggest keys to us really being able to move forward is recognizing it and then having compassion for ourselves. And then again and again. And that's because that's the normal process. Because you're doing this doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It actually means that you're normal.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, having grace for those situations that we didn't know we were stuck in and having compassion for those other versions of ourselves that didn't know, that literally had the blinders on, that didn't know that we had needs and desires and didn't know that we wanted to experience a new level of freedom, right? Those are past versions of ourselves and they served us to get to this moment. And I think having grace and kindness towards those parts of ourselves and those versions of ourselves is a very valuable tool and something to practice. Oh, like you said, over and
Yeah.
over and over again. You're going to have moments where you slip up and you're not the kindest person to yourself. So, I love that advice. Well, thank you so much for being here, Kyle. I am so excited for our listeners to hear this one. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for having me on.
What a powerful conversation. Huge thank you to Kyle for sharing his story, his insight, and his heart. I know so many of you listening needed to hear this, especially if you have ever felt lost after leaving something toxic and trying to find your footing again. Kyle's work is a beautiful reminder that healing is possible and thriving is not off the table. So if you loved this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who just needs to hear it. It helps the show grow and means the world to me. Stay tuned for our episode next week of Becoming Unbound.